The first specific reference to neighborhood ministry is found in a program booklet published in 1921 for the 50th anniversary celebration. The booklet refers to a church service corps, which entailed dividing the city into 10 districts, each having a corps of church members under the leadership of a captain. The focus was to invite neighbors to become members of the church, introduce them to the larger congregation, and help nurture them in their faith journey. In 1921, 250 members were enlisted in this neighborhood work, and over the next 100 years, neighborhood mission and ministry would change focus, take different forms, but become a firm commitment of LABC. Following World War I, the influx of immigrants increased significantly and presented a mission opportunity for churches across the land. The Northern Baptist Convention and the Women's American Baptist Mission Society stepped forward with the organization of the Christian Americanization Department in March 1919. The mission effort ultimately was organized at the national, district, state, city, and local church level. Rochester was no exception to the influx of immigrants. As early as 1912, we find a Mrs. Simmons who called motherly women of the church together to call on certain Italian folks to speak with them and to teach American ways of caring for their homes and children. A few women responded, and at the same time, some of the Sunday school leaders attempted to begin a Sunday school class for the Italian children of the neighborhood. After a 1922 introduction to the Americanization program, a group of American Baptist women at LABC began teaching Sunday school classes for the Italian youth, and in 1925 a Sunday school community hour was initiated. It was attended mostly by children and some parents. It included singing, prayer, and slideshows on the life of Christ. By 1926, Mr. and Mrs. Agueto would become pastor of the first Italian Baptist church that took over the Sunday Community Hour. For 3 different years, the Christian Americanization Club, or committee, hosted an event for people from other nations, including Cuba, Poland, Denmark, Japan, Armenia, and Native Americans. There was receptions, guests, and an hour program for girls and boys, ending with a devotional hour. In February 1931, the Italian Young People's Club was established with 18 members. In November of that year, Mr. Giacomelli, a student at CRCDS, was appointed the Italian student pastor for work with the Italian persons of LABC. On September 4th, 1918, Mrs. Mary Carmen joined Lake Avenue Baptist Church, and by November 19th of that year, she was appointed church school principal and Sunday school visitor. In the 1920s, she was appointed to serve as the church social worker in the neighborhood. To aid in the church school and parish visitor programs, 2 cars were acquired. And upon 20 years of service, Mary was the guest of honor along with Mrs. Ruth Ron, pastor's assistant, at a testimonial dinner celebrating each of their ministries. In August of 1942, Mrs. Mary Carmen retired, and her time at LABC was the beginning of the history of the Carmen family serving in ministry and mission at LABC. In 1884, after moving into its newly planned house of worship, LABC moved brick by brick their old Sabbath school down to Lyle Avenue to become the new Lyle Avenue Sabbath School Mission. And on July 1st, 1890, the Lyle Sabbath School Mission was formally organized into Lyle Avenue Baptist Church, along with 60 members of LABC who were dismissed from the congregation for that purpose. Unfortunately, in 1966, the Lyle Avenue Baptist Church experienced a devastating fire, and while they would recover in time, in 1984 the congregation voted to disband, and their building would become Cameron Community Ministries. In the early years of the 19th century, a number of Polish immigrants arrived in the United States. While most were Catholic, there were a number who were Baptist. It was between 1900 and 1910 that the Polish Baptist movement began in Rochester, led by Reverend Ludwig Adamus, who had been a student at Rochester Theological Seminary. And with the assistance of the Baptist Union of Rochester, which included LABC, this group of individuals took possession of the church building at the corner of Hudson and Roycroft Drive, forming the Polish Baptist Mission of Rochester. Even as late as the 1930s, this church was one of only 17 Polish Baptist churches in the United States, and over the years, LABC Women's Mission Society became supportive of the church in many ways. And finally, in the 1920s, when the neighborhoods then known as the Lakedale area, north of the cemeteries off of Lake Ave, continued to grow at such a great rate, Dr. Bevan, pastor of LABC, and Mr. Richard Kemp decided that a Sunday school mission needed to be established, and so in 1927 this new venture began. In 1928, the mission was organized into a church known as Church of the Master. Reverend David S. Matthews was called as the first pastor. The church was formally founded on Thursday, March 29, 1928. The edifice then was dedicated in 1929. And then in 1944, plans were laid for the construction of a sanctuary to be added to the educational building. But due to World War II, the fundraising campaign lagged, and a new effort was made in 1949. Finally, after a couple of setbacks with fundraising and building, on May 15, 1955, the first worship service was held, and on June 5th, the new Alfred Bevan Memorial Sanctuary was dedicated.